saw what you did to us, and they know you know better. There's nothing special about you.
Yes, they did see.
They saw the ugliness of violence as a solution, and it frightened them. It frightened me too when I decided to cross that line and do what you do. It's so easy. Anger. Vengeance. Luckily, I'm not you.
It's been well over a couple years now since James Gunn sort of came in and began a resurgence for the DC cinematic universe. After a decade of DC insisting on making all their films feel homogenized in the style of Zack Snyder, and not in the style of the characters they're actually adapting, we had finally a sense of hope and optimism towards the future of DC films with James Gunn taking control. It seemed for a while that we were going to have DC films actually focus more on telling the stories the way the characters should be told, and less so at just appeasing the vision of a single director. While this is still kind of what they're doing in the sense of allowing James Gunn to essentially lead the new way of DC, I feel James Gunn is a lot more open to stylistic changes and a better willingness to actually adapt the feel and tone of the character first, less so just shove in his directorial style and insist everything falls in line regardless if it actually fits the tone of the character. And after months of waiting and analyzing set photos and getting myself honestly pretty hyped to see a return to form, we finally have a trailer for the new Superman movie being directed by James Gunn. It feels like I've been waiting for this film for honestly my entire life. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a very big Spider-Man fan. He's one of my favorite fictional characters ever, and probably my favorite superhero, and one that I'm pretty religiously obsessed over ever since I was a little child. But the character not many people know that I'm actually equally a fan of is Superman. When I was a kid, I loved Superman, and there were a few Halloweens that I actually went out as Superman when I wanted to take a break of going out as Spider-Man for the 7th Halloween in a row. And when I was a kid, I actively really loved the Christopher Reeve films, as well as the Brandon Routh film Superman Returns. I still think that movie's pretty good. It has its flaws, there's no doubt in that, but I felt it truly captured the character of Superman, and it still feels like a Superman film to me. Not to mention, Brandon Routh was a very underrated Superman that I feel did a fantastic job and was just not really given a chance to really shine on the big screen like he could have. And when I was a teenager, I had to put up with what I coined the dark era of Superman with the Zack Snyder film. So with James Gunn's new trailer out, let's talk about it and analyze kind of how I feel, because I have a lot of thoughts towards this trailer.
Home. Take me home.
I think the tone of this trailer is perfect. I love the way the trailer focuses on Superman as a whole, and more or less Superman in this feeling of him being a big, grand superhero. He's for everyone, and he's meant to be a symbol of hope. And when I watch this trailer, I fully get that feeling from it. You can tell that they understood the assignment on how Superman's supposed to feel and how he's supposed to be for those in that world. With a character like this flying around, the sense of hope and optimism he'd bring to those that are in danger. And just through the little shots that this trailer shows and the little bits of dialogue that are presented, I fully believe that that's the goal of this Superman, is to capture this feeling of hope, optimism, and that everything will be okay because Superman's there. I'm also a huge fan of the color grading of this film. I know it's been brought up by basically everyone who doesn't understand film and who like to say that this film has bad color correction, but what they really mean to say is color grading. I've seen a lot of comments online say that the color correction in this film looks terrible, but that's actually not what they're complaining about. What they mean to say is that they're upset about the color grading. It's a very different thing, and I've seen a lot of people confuse the two when going at this film and trying to find critiques for it. It's definitely going for a much brighter, more heavily saturated tone, like the early comics it's trying to adapt. I know this is hard for a lot of people that are more fans of Zack Snyder's directing style and his cinematography, that like their films to all look washed out and super dark, regardless if that doesn't fit the character it's adapting. But I myself am more than okay with welcoming in a Superman film that has cinematography that goes for a much more lighthearted, saturated, and comic book approach. I mean, this is a movie adapting a comic book character after all. What's the shame in it looking like a comic book? When I hear the complaint that it's oversaturated or that it looks cartoonish, it's basically just that you're complaining that it looks like Superman. Oh, I'm sorry that the Superman movie actually looks like the character. I know you're not used to that, but I also think even though it's an early trailer, a lot of the CGI actually looks really good. Albeit these are probably the shots that are mostly done or completely finished, as that's usually how trailers go. And if this is pretty close to finished, I think it looks really good. Krypto looks fantastic, and I think a lot of the shots of Superman in action really look great. I also like how in the trailer we can see Superman clearly fighting what look like kaiju. As James Gunn has said, kaiju will be featured in this film, definitely bringing me back to the early days of Superman, that golden age when Superman used to fight a lot more kaijus, more in the style of villain of the week and monster, and less so big end of the world supervillains as he would later become known for. And I like that with this film, it definitely feels like a return to form of that early days of Superman and going in more of the approach of starting off small and starting off kind of easy the way the comics did before we eventually move into the more big end of the world supervillains that I'm sure James Gunn will be introducing later down the line. This, after all, does fit in line with what he said the first phase of this DCU will be, which is gods and monsters. Though the one thing about that I'm actually happy that this trailer is showing me a bit of a divergence in is the god aspect. When you look back to the Zack Snyder films, there is a very heavy indication that the films want you to look at their Superman as a god, and not just a god, but an angry god. There was a lot of heavy Jesus and religious imagery and representation of trying to compare Superman to Jesus and religious god. And while I can understand the want to do that, after all, Superman is a superpowered being from a different planet that to most would be looked at as a godlike figure, I just don't feel that that fully fits with the tone of the character that you're trying to adapt. Superman is supposed to feel more like an everyman that has these superpowers and chooses to do the right thing. And I can very much tell that with this trailer, that's the direction James Gunn is seemingly trying to go. This Superman feels more down to earth, surprisingly, and actually feels like a guy you could know. There does seem to be an emphasis on his home roots. I like seeing the shots of him and his father and him comforting him. I hope we actually do see more of Pa Kent in this movie because that's something I just really did not like from the Zack Snyder film. I feel he was very much not handled the greatest there and says some really questionable bits of dialogue to Clark in those movies.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
As well as having one of the dumbest deaths you could put on screen. I think trying to give Superman's dad a big dramatic death like this just doesn't really work. Something about the death in the comics being that he just dies of a heart attack, something that Superman can't stop, something that Superman's powers can't really be used to prevent. He just has to deal with the fact that his dad is human and dies in a very human way. I've always really liked that, and I never liked the way Zack Snyder handled that aspect. But that was just one of the many things that Zack Snyder did not handle well. I'm very excited to especially see David Corenswet as Superman. I think he looks perfect. He captures that perfect mix of Henry Cavill, but also Christopher Reeve. Without a doubt, he looks just like Superman. I think he'll do a great job. We didn't get to see a lot of his acting range in the trailer, as most of the trailer had no dialogue, but I do think he looks perfect as Superman, and I'm excited to see more of what he can bring either in the next trailer or just the film itself. I think he has the chance to be the best Superman that we've seen put to screen, but that bar for me is set pretty damn high by Christopher Reeve. There are a few shots in this trailer that look straight out of a comic book, especially this one, which is like my personal favorite in the entire trailer. It feels like a Superman comic, both visually, in tone, and costumes. I am very excited for everything that it has to offer.
We also see a lot of familiar faces from the Superman comics in this trailer. Primarily, we get our first look at Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. We didn't see too much of him in the trailer, but just from the few shots we did, I think he looks pretty good. He's a little skinny. I prefer my Lex Luthors to be pretty buff because I like to pretend that he always is compensating for Superman's strength by making himself really ripped.
Doesn't his very existence diminish you? Diminish us all? Can you imagine a better world, Kent? In a world without Superman, the unattainable Lois Lane might have noticed good old Clark pining away in the corner.
You keep talking about me, but I'm here to interview you.
You're a prize catch for a cynical city girl. Next to Superman, even Lex Luthor's greatness is overshadowed.
But I do think that Nicholas Hoult looks like he could very much be a really good Lex Luthor. I'm excited to see more of him potentially in the next trailer or just in the film itself and really judge and see how good he is compared to all the other Lex Luthors we've had throughout history. It'll definitely be better than the one that was in the Zack Snyder Batman v Superman film with Jesse Eisenberg.
Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
That was absolutely terrible. We also see our first look at Lois Lane, played by Rachel Bosnian, and I hope that she'll bring a new take on the character, but also live up to the legacy that the character Lois Lane has. She's one of my favorite superhero love interests because she's more than just a love interest. She's a very well-written, pretty dynamic character that I feel can be done a lot of justice if they actually care, and if the actress tries to bring a lot to it. Hopefully, just like Lex Luthor, we can see a little bit more of her in the next trailer, and some more scenes of possibly her and Clark, so we can get a bit more of their dynamic. We also see shots of the Daily Planet in this trailer, and it finally actually looks like the Daily Planet again, which is amazing. We even see shots of characters like Mr. Terrific, the first time he's been brought to the big screen, although he was brought to the small screen in some of the CW shows. We also see our first look at the Guy Gardner Green Lantern. This one is pretty exciting. While it is comic accurate, you can't lie, that hairdo is pretty fucking, oh boy, who let homeboy out of the house like that? We also see our first look at Hawkgirl in this trailer, played by Isabella Marcii. She was actually from the recent Alien Romulus movie, so it's exciting to see her in another role so soon, and hopefully she does just as good here as she did in that film. We get to see a lot of just the little teases of the world that kind of pre-exists in this Superman film. It seems like superheroes are already active and have apparently been going for a long time, although they do appear to all be owned by this one company. We know that Maxwell Lord will be in the film, played by James Gunn. So what I'm led to believe from the trailer and the set photos is that most of these superheroes are owned by Maxwell, and Superman is kind of that odd one out. He's not really owned by like the corporate sort of conglomerate. So we actually get a lot in the first trailer, showing us a lot of the world and the characters that we're going to be coming to expect from this new universe and new Superman film. I think a lot of it looks really good. The characters look just like the way they should, and I'm excited to see what a lot of these actors bring to the characters. As a Superman fan, the last 10 years have been very tiresome. When Man of Steel first came out, I can't lie, I was excited. I was like everybody else and was a young Superman fan that was ready for a big action-packed, amazing CGI-filled, wonderful film. But that's not what we got. And although I didn't want to admit it when I first saw it at 13, I felt an odd sense of disappointment. I came out of the film thinking that the action scenes were great, albeit had lots of unnecessary violence and destruction, and had Superman throwing Zod through a city, probably killing more people than he would save, and at times him feeling completely out of character. But I did think the CGI was really good, so I guess that kind of counterbalanced it. So when I came out of the theater, I tried to convince myself I liked it. Going back to it in recent years, I still do like aspects of Man of Steel. I think it's well shot and has some of the best cinematography put to a Superman film. There's no denying that Zack Snyder knows how to make a good looking frame and really knows how to utilize his CGI at times. But good framing and good visuals is not all a movie makes. The story is pretty messy and does cut corners when it comes to character to make up for its inadequacies in how it tells itself, especially in the ways it portrays Superman's tone and character, not always being accurate to the character it's adapting. Superman is very mean in this movie, he's very angry, and he's a lot more stoic-like than he is friendly and comforting. And where I can kind of see where that's coming from in trying to adapt an early days Superman, it just never fully fit to me because it continued to do that in each film. Each time we saw Henry Cavill's Superman, he was angry, he was mean, he was overtly stoic, and always had a sense of having a stick up his ass. And now I don't believe that this is Henry Cavill's fault, but rather Zack Snyder's. If you actually look at interviews of Henry Cavill, he very much captures the personality of Superman in his own personality. And I think he very much could have been a perfect Superman if given the right film. But unfortunately, he just wasn't. And that's just what it is. It's disappointing, and it's something I feel a lot of people need to get over. I think Henry Cavill could have been a perfect Superman just as much as the next person, but he isn't. And his movies weren't good because Zack Snyder fundamentally doesn't understand the character of Superman and never tried to. He's actively stated he pretty much doesn't even like the character itself. And if you're fans of these movies, that's okay. I still go back sometimes and watch Man of Steel as well. It's a pretty fun action movie if you just ignore it as a Superman film and just watch it for what it is. But as a Superman fan and as someone who likes this character outside of just that film and actively likes the character in the comics more than I like Man of Steel, I want to see a Superman film that actually feels like Superman. And that's why I'm very accepting towards what James Gunn is giving us. It looks like the Superman that I grew up reading. It looks like the Superman I grew up watching in cartoons. I don't want a dark, gritty Superman. If I want a dark, gritty version of Superman, I'm gonna go watch The Boys and get some Homelander. If I want a version of Superman that's a little bit more realistic, not super gritty and violent, but is more aggressive, I'll go watch or read Invincible. There are other series that do the whole gritty, evil, realistic Superman. But for me personally, when I watch a Superman movie, I want it to feel like Superman. I'm not James Gunn's biggest fan or anything, but I can't lie. I
I've watched all of his films, and I have yet to watch a James Gunn film that I don't personally like. Yeah, you can find flaws in some of his films, and they aren't for everybody.
Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's for sure. But they aren't bad movies by any means. He is a director that understands how to write interesting characters, as well as putting a lot of effort into his dynamics and his character arcs, and actively trying to tell emotional stories and arcs with the characters he's using. Superman has decades of history to pull from, decades of well-told stories that most of the films, and especially the Zack Snyder films, just don't choose to ever pick from. They seem scared to fully embrace the character of Superman, and this movie gives me confidence that they're not scared anymore. The inclusion of Krypto alone fully convinces me that they actively want to embrace every aspect of this character. It feels like July 2025 can't come fast enough. Holy fuck, I hate saying that sentence. But I'm very hyped, and I definitely will be in the theater day one to see this movie. I'm so excited to see a Superman film that has a feeling of hope, optimism, and just joy to it. The dark age of this character seems like it's finally coming to an end. Both the animated shows My Adventures with Superman as well as this new film feel like they are fully embracing the days of the character when he stood for something lighthearted, a better tomorrow, and a constant pursuit of truth and justice.
So even Smallville's rooting for the elite.
Now, just the loud, angry, and stupid.
Come on, it's not that simple. I don't think that I make them feel safe anymore. The way I do things.
Clark, when people are scared, they have a tendency to hop on a bandwagon before they see who's driving it. But when they wise up, and believe me, they will, what matters is that you'll be there for them, leading by example, just like always. Truth, justice, and the American way. It ain't broke, so don't fix it.
Thanks, Pa.
So, those are my thoughts on this trailer and my thoughts on the last few years of Superman as a whole in media. Did you enjoy the video? Did you enjoy the trailer? Let me know down below. I always like when people actually let me know what they think about this video, as well as what they feel about whatever I'm talking about. My next video that I'll be having coming out is going to be a two-parter of my 2024 recap. It ended up being a bit longer than I had actually anticipated, so I'm gonna have to be splitting the video into two parts. The first part will be discussing all the films and media that I watched and enjoyed this year, and the second part will be going over my life over the last year, as well as all the short films that I made and my outlooks towards 2025. Look forward to that. It'll be out within the next week. Hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.
You're living in a dream world!
Good. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better. And on my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.